But today it hosts the grand final of the Shell Oil's Australian Endurance Championship for motorcycles. And while Kawasaki's hard-charging Rob Phillis leads the championship after 5 rounds, it's the local hard-charger Mick Doohan who has everything to gain and nothing to lose. Doohan tails Phillis in the championship by just 10 points, but yesterday he claimed pole position with a lap record-shattering time of 60.88 seconds. To win the title today, Doohan has to win both rounds of the Shell Oil's Australian Endurance Championship here at Lakeside. Phillis has to finish less than 5th on aggregate over the 2 rounds. Now, is that an impossible task? Well, if you look at Oran Park, as it happens recently, all Phillis has to do is falter, and young Mick has proved he's capable of doing it on his ear.
Down to here, Doohan's on the inside and he won't give way, and he's gone inside. Campbell has forced his way past, and he'll get the power and he'll lead him in the run to the line, and he does hold him off. So is Michael Doohan across the line first. Highlights of other races. And Campbell's off, and blast the bike follows him as well, and bad luck Malcolm Campbell. Phillis is fairly interested. Keeping Michael Doohan in sight, keeping himself in second place. The way that the points are worked out for these races is that, Robbie Phillis, if you win the championship tomorrow, is that really your first Australian title?
Yeah, I guess so. Official Australian title. But I've got to win it first.
It's not too hard for you to win from here, though, is it?
Oh, anything could happen. Like, if we don't have any problems, well, it should be okay. But there's a few guys going fast, and could put a few places between me and Mick, so you don't know.
And you're not 100% fit, are you?
No, I'm okay. I'm just a little bit sore in the ribs, that's all.
Michael Doohan, congratulations on coming into the Marlborough Yamaha dealer team to follow Kevin McGee and on doing such a good job of it. Did you feel the pressure at the beginning of the season?
No, not really. I was told there was no pressure on me to perform, so I just took it that way. Just went out there to have fun. I'm still going out having fun. That's just the way.
And yet, when you first got the rides last year, when Kevin was away a couple of times, people were literally saying, "Who's Michael Doohan?" weren't they?
Yeah, well, I'd only ever ridden 250 production bikes virtually. And Warren offered me a ride when Mike was out hurt one time, and it just went from there. It's been great.
It's a big day in SBS Sport today. After Lakeside, we'll be crossing to Les Murray at Parramatta Park in Sydney for the grand final of the National Soccer League. But right now, they're about to take off on their warm-up lap for the first of 2 55-minute heats. Between each heat, there'll be a 20-minute to stop for them to re-prepare their bike for the next heat, and that's twice the distance that they had, or twice the time rather, they had at Oran Park 3 weeks ago, when the short stop almost precluded Malcolm Campbell from getting out there for the second leg. In central commentary position today is Australian national champion Greg Hansford as guest commentator, and he's with SBS motorcycle anchorman Will Hagan.
Indeed, and the bikes go out now to warm up for this first of 2 55-minute heats, as John Smale said. Just now, instead of a 10-minute, a 20-minute break between the two of them. And Greg Hansford, you knew Lakeside Circuit before it had the wiggly bits put in the top to slow people up. You've been round here in what, about 56 seconds, 58 seconds, depending on what sort of bike. It's a pretty busy circuit even in those days.
It is. It's quite a bumpy circuit. They've done a lot of resurfacing here, but the resurfacing has still followed the contour of the bumps, and it's a circuit where you don't get any sort of a rest. You know, you're coming down the main straight here and you're only on for about 5 or 6 seconds, and it's a physically very demanding circuit.
And Greg, for an endurance race for 55 minutes, you're compounding the problem, aren't you?
You can't ride around here as you would in a 10-lap sprint race for 1 hour. It just takes too much out of you, too much out of the bike, the tyres, the suspension, one big package. You've got to go back to 95, 96%.
And unforgiving too, because the fences are dauntingly close in a lot of places.
They've made it a lot safer than what it was, when we were riding here 5, 6, 7 years ago. They've shifted a lot of the dirt walls, and they've shifted a few of the fences back a bit, but unfortunately the layout of the circuit, they've done, I think, about the best they can do, and we're stuck with what's left. Greg,
you've been overseas, you've won 10 Grands Prix there. It's only this year that, of course, Wayne Gardner has bettered the number of GPs that you've won. It was late last year, but Randy Mamola, as also a non-world champion, betted the number that you'd won. So you've seen the scene at the top level in Australia and overseas. Summarise the riders that we're going to see today, some of the riders, the ones that have been around a long time, like Mal Campbell and Robbie Phillips, the newcomers like Michael Doohan. How do you see them?
Well, I think Michael Doohan has got more potential than anyone here at the moment. Malcolm Campbell and Robbie Phillips have shown us what they can do in Europe. If they had more time over there, I'm sure that they would be winning races instead of coming third, fourth and fifth place. But I think Michael's got a real big future in front of him here.
And Mal Campbell, Robbie Phillips, they're pretty good runners too, aren't they? And still keen to win.
Sure, well, they've got the experience behind them and the backup that they haven't had in the past, and you've got to compare that with the inexperience and the will to win that the newcomer like McDoohan's got.
And so now they come down to line up. It's a packed field of bikes. These super bikes, based on production frames, production engines. The engine's allowed to be highly modified. The frames not to nearly the same extent. Brakes must relate to the road-going bike. So the RC30 Honda, a limited edition Honda with a single-sided rear swing arm, the more related to road-going or a more common type of road-going bike in the Kawasaki. The Yamaha 1000s in production form, unmodified. 750 in superbike, modified form. Ducati, Robert Holden here today, of the fuel injection type that's being used in the World Superbike Championship. We'll see at Oran Park on September 25. A good day for Shell. This is the final round of the Shell Championships. Their Shell driver, Nick Johnston, on pole position. Silverstone, as they get ready now, and they get the green light for away for 55 minutes. The first of the two heats, and it's Phillips ahead of Doohan, ahead of Robbie Scollier, and then Michael Dowson. And one of Lakeside's other disadvantages, Greg Hanson's pretty narrow.
Yeah, it's not the easiest places in the world to pass, and the distances between the corners aren't long enough where you can get a good run out of the corner behind the guy in front. You can't get past before the next corner. You've got to do some desperate braking manoeuvres.
Phyllis, Dowson, Doohan, Scollier, Campbell. Rod Cox well placed there in all the blue machine for Just Motorcycles. Coming back, getting himself ready after only 5 rides in 2 years. Former Castrol 6-hour winner and also Arrow 500 advantage for that World Superbike Championship at Oran Park. And it's Doohan. And Phyllis would be very silly at this moment to argue. He's pretty sore. As we heard him say, he did a rib, and what he didn't say was that was in a go-karting accident, mucking around with his mechanic, Peter Doyle, and also with Mick Doohan. Doohan saw it all happen, and Robbie endoed the go-kart 1.5 times. Cracked his neck, hurt his back, wearing shorts and a t-shirt, of course. Did have decent shoes on.
Would have had his Japanese bosses quite a few heart attacks while watching that sort of behavior.
Oh yes, it was a bit serious, but they tend to be like that when they're playing. Doohan here, pulling away from Phyllis, from Dowson, who'd been having trouble setting his bike up. Scollier, and then Tony Armstrong, I think, in there in 5th place, and 35 in behind him is Sean Gallagher. He's been hurt recently. At Winton he was put out, and then it's Rod Cox. He's on 40 and in 7th place. On 5 is Paul Feeney. He's in 8th place, and 3 is Malcolm Campbell.
Talking to Michael Dowson last night, well, he said he was having all sorts of trouble during the week setting the bike up on the circuit here, which he hasn't sort of had in the past, but he was hoping for better things this morning. They made a few changes and took a few guesses, and looks like it's worked out fairly well for him.
This gap nearly 1.5 seconds now to the flying Doohan, getting away from them. Dowson seemed to have that problem here. Last Swan Series, the final round last year. Here, this time, and also at Oran Park. And I don't know whether the pressure of the way McGee and now Doohan is doing in the team, the two of them young guys coming into the team as the juniors on both occasions, really, to Dowson. And in most instances, sort of putting the package together better through the season, and now nearly Dowson under Phyllis, but not quite.
Yeah, it certainly wouldn't help having two other guys getting the more publicity and the results over what Michael's been having, but he's had a shocking run for the last 12 months with quite a few accidents, and really only probably half of the accidents his own fault, like the one in Japan a week or two ago was caused held on the track from a couple of other bikes that were in front of them all.
And now at very high speed as they come down through this keep. As you can see, it's Dowson up into the lead over Phyllis, that is in this battle for second place. So second is Dowson, third's Phyllis, fourth is Robbie Scolyer. So that's Yamaha, Kawasaki, Honda in those three, and it's Yamaha leading, and it's leading by about 2.6 seconds. If we're talking of crashing as well, we can talk about Michael Doohan. He went down 4 times at Sugo in Japan, yet won the restarted second heat where Michael Dowson and Marco Lucanelli both crashed on what appeared to be an oil spill. Both went down absolutely instantaneously. Took them 40 minutes to clear the track, and on the restarted race, Doohan won that, just flashing through the foreground there. Came third overall, equal on the day, with Robbie Phillips, who'd had 2 sixth places. Coming around now to complete lap 4. .87 seconds the gap from Marlborough Yamaha dealer team rider Michael Doohan to his teammate Michael Dowson. Just a tad back to Robbie Scolyer's in third, Phyllis is in fourth. So Phyllis happy to sit in and wait. And Greg Hansford, that's a pretty sensible sort of approach for a man who can haul them back if he needs to, and who in the point score doesn't need to, only needs to keep them in sight.
Yeah, you've got to keep that in the back of your mind, and there's not much sense tearing everything apart, and especially seeing you've got a few pains in different areas of his body.
Scolyer too doing a good job in Team Honda these days. A lot of people critical when he first came in because there's a marriage link up there with Robbie Scolyer, but he's really justified his position as a solid supporting number 2 rider, hasn't he?
He's been going very well, and the way he's going around here, he's going to do the same thing again today.
3.7 seconds the gap back from Yamaha to Yamaha. Dowson behind Michael Doohan.
Michael still seems to be having trouble with his bike. It was horrible with the last lap coming out of the new section of the circuit there, just back wheel letting go and bouncing very badly.
You get a chance to look at it here. It's a bumpy section of circuit. If you haven't got it well set up, it's really emphasised. Doohan absolutely flying. He's completed 5 laps. The leading production bike is in 10th place overall. Bike number 16, James Knight for Team RK Racing. Here's Michael Doohan.
He looks very comfortable on that bike, Will. He's just fits in perfectly the way they've set, Warren set it up for him, and I guess it's showing in the way that he's performing with the lap time.
Yes, he really does look like a natural on the bike, doesn't he? As you say, he looks comfortable, relaxed, and when he's putting in a quick time, it doesn't look ragged, does it?
No, he's doing very well. I think he looked also very comfortable and steady on the 250s when he was riding them, and his natural ability is showing when he can jump off a 250 and straight onto a 750 and do the right thing first up.
Well, of course, there's talk of him going Grand Prix racing next year. There's been some nibbles from overseas teams and some interest, and I said to Warren yesterday, but McGee had at least ridden in a Swan Series, ridden the Grand Prix bike. I said, Doohan's never been on one. He said, a mere technicality.
Well, it is really. I mean, Australians are pretty high up in the rankings now, the people that are running the teams overseas, and all they're asking is who's coming next, and they want to grab them because they know that they're going to do what Wayne and Kevin have been able to do. 3.5 seconds back from the bunch in second place. That's Dowson and Scolyer to Phyllis in fourth place. 3.5 seconds. Fifth place is Rod Cox on number 40. He's back up in front of Tony Armstrong. In fact, he's gone back a fair way because it's Malcolm Campbell up into sixth place from ninth on lap 1. This is at the end of lap 7. So Campbell on number 3 is 6th. On 7th place on number 5 is Paul Feeney. In 8th place is Tony Armstrong, and in 9th place is Sean Gallagher, followed then leading production bike James Knight, number 16, 10th.
production class is 8 points behind Wayne Clark. He's an 84, Knights on 76. Doohan, another one down. 8 completed. Racing nearly for 8.5 minutes. Scintillating form from him. Round here you can see Dowson and Scollier, they're busy at it. So too a little bit further back, 5th and 6th place. So with Phyllis sandwiched between that pair and this pair I'm talking about is Rod Cox on 40, Malcolm Campbell on 3. So there goes the battle for second. A good vigorous one too. Yamaha and the V4 Honda. And off down the straight, lapping number 36, Salvatore Ragus. There goes Phyllis, and then this is the battle for 5th and 6th. Rod Cox, who's slotted into 5th, but being caught by Malcolm Campbell. And Cox doing a good job. He was 7th on lap 1, lap 2 he was up to 6th, then he was up to 5th and has been there ever since. Campbell in that time had come from 9th, made up 2 places to 7th by lap 3 and then 6th, and now is working on hauling back the deficit. But if we talk of people who are a bit bruised and feeling a bit tentative, it's Malcolm Campbell. You've seen the toss that he took at Oran Park. Well, that started off a nasty period for him. He's pretty sore from all that, and went to Sugo and proceeded to bash himself. Well, not quite into oblivion, but he's decided today's the day for a finish and a result, and a good hot bath with nothing added to the curious colours in some parts of his body. See what he can do with Rod Cox. Cox is a good runner. They're both of them similar age, although Malcolm Campbell talks of being 32, 33. Rod Cox says, I'm 32. Malcolm Campbell, some say, could be as old as 36.
Well, I'm 25.
And you were racing for...
Yeah, I started when I was 11, well.
Yeah. That's Ragus, Salvatore on 36, being picked up by Cox, then Campbell. And Malcolm really does give it his all, doesn't he, Greg?
Always has done. Never done anything but.
No.
It's hard to imagine Malcolm sitting back there and say, let's take it easy today and come through for a finish, but he's not the sort of person that if he gets involved with a scrap with someone else, we're just going to let them go by without some sort of rush to their money.
Phyllis has to be cautious too, because this Cox Campbell business, if that starts to come forward, and they're not far from him, as you can see, he could start to come under threat. He's series lead, so Cox and Campbell, in a sense, are helping Michael Doohan 10 points in arrears in the Shell Oils Australian Endurance Championship overall. Greg Hansford, the idea of, not the idea of crashing, but the attitude to crashing has changed over the years. You had a season, what was your worst season for crashing overseas?
I think it wasn't just overseas, it was 15 times, you know, here in Australia and, you know, doing the Grand Prix in Europe, because we did a bit of commuting backwards and forwards, but that was the worst part, but not all during races. We doing a lot of tyre testing that year, and they made a bad batch of tyres. You're the first one to find out about it.
Yeah, you had a lot of problem testing tyres. And I was talking with Jack Ahern last night, the Australian who was runner-up in the World 500 Championship, who, in other words, was only bettered by Wayne Gardner in terms of his position in the 500 Championship when Gardner won the title last year. And Jack said, yeah, well, in 40 years I crashed 5 times. We see here Michael Doohan, the race leader. He said, and 2 of those were Suzuki that locked up and threw me off. So I was only responsible for 3 of them. But Jack said, you only crash if you're trying. I said, I wasn't trying, I was having fun. Interesting style there from Steve McLeod on the Ducati number 48. Long wheelbase bikes, the Ducatis, and so feel nice and stable, Greg, don't they, in a straight line, but not so quick to change direction necessarily.
No, the steering geometry is very different from the Yamahas and the Hondas. It's well, you've got to give them credit the way that Lucanelli's going around his big four-stroke overseas is absolutely fantastic, which is real. It's hard for me to believe that the bike is doing what he's doing with it.
Yeah, it's not astonishing. Of course, they're allowed a lower weight limit. These bikes have to be 165 kilos. A two-cylinder, such as the Ducati is, and it's fuel injected, can be as little as 140 kilos, so it can be 25 kilos lighter. It's pumping a lot of power, and
they sound nice too.
Marco Lucanelli, a World 500 champion, knows how to ride too. And Michael Doohan will be racing against him at Oran Park, September 25. So that's 3 weeks' time. And that's what all these guys are thinking about now, even through this weekend. A lot of people heading towards that Oran Park meeting where Freddie Merkel from the United States, David Tardozzi from Italy on the Bimota with a Yamaha engine, Marco Lucanelli on the Ducati, the big V-twin, fuel injected, will be up against these guys, and they have Tardozzi and Lucanelli faster bikes. But Warren Willing, the team manager for Michael Doohan, says, oh, but they can't stretch their legs at Oran Park. My boys will be right. They don't go around corners as fast as Michael Doohan does. He said, I think Doohan can beat him there. And I know he'll be trying, Greg. What do you reckon?
Yeah, he certainly will be. It's his next step to show the rest of the world what Michael Doohan can do. And when everyone's eyes are there, like, that'll be the ideal time for him to blow these guys off.
23 years old, relaxed, quick, pile of natural ability, coming up lapping Jeff Paul, 46. Past him, 27. Then next in 21. Sorry, next in sights is John Stamnus. And he's cautious about doing it. He's careful and sensible, not in a big rush. And we've now completed 14 laps. This is the 15th. Doohan looping around the top now. After 15 minutes of racing in this Shell Oils Australian Endurance Championship, heat 1 of the 6th and final round. It's Michael Doohan from Marlboro Yamaha dealer team, from Michael Dowson, his teammate, Robbie Scolyer, the lead Honda rider, Robbie Phillips for Kawasaki, and the series leader in 4th place. He's followed by Rod Cox, Malcolm Campbell. Still Campbell on number 3, hasn't found his way around Cox, and in fact Cox is coming at this moment down past Robbie Phillips, putting him back a place to 5th. So the series leader is under some threat, and Malcolm Campbell can't catch the flyer on bike number 40. And in 7th place, it's bike number 5. That's Paul Feeney for RK Racing. Then it's the defending champion, Tony Armstrong, doing it on a pretty tight budget. Sean Gallagher on 35, and the production class leader, James Knight, 16. Was at 15 minutes of racing, and it's now into lap 16 as Doohan comes round to complete that across the start-finish line. And then it's Dowson, not far in front of Scolyer. Then you see, leading this bunch of 4, that's Cox. And Phillips is in there, and Campbell's come past them too. So now Robbie Phillips has got to get serious, because he is now back in 6th place. That's 10 points only. If he were to average that on the day and to collect 10 points overall, and Doohan were to win both, they'd be tied on points, and Doohan at that stage would have had 3 wins. Phillips has had 2, Doohan's had 2, and Michael Dowson's had 1 in Adelaide, and that would give Doohan the title. So Phillips, get a sprint on. You've got to get on the march now. You've got to get after Malcolm Campbell at least. He's starting to run a real risk, because that's assuming, and we don't know Greg Hansford, he could have a bike problem that's slowing him at the moment.
I was going to say that before. He's going just a little bit too slow to probably not to have any problem.
Because he is a great little fighter, isn't he?
Yeah, He's the Jeff Fennick of the motorcycle world.
Greg, if he'd been hungrier, more determined to go overseas, or perhaps managed by somebody who'd grabbed him and taken his ability over there and said, ride this, he really could have done very well, couldn't he?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, we've not just Robbie. There's 4 or 5 guys here that could have done exactly the same thing with. But sure, Robbie would. He's got the capability and the will to win and everything that you do need to do that.
Why is it that Australian motor Scolio from 3rd place?
And Rob Scolio, what's the problem?
As I come down the dip there, I went to change gears. My foot went straight down the ground. The foot peak's broken off.
Did you have an off?
Beg your pardon?
Did you have an off?
Did I have an off?
Yeah, did the bike
No,
off?
no, it just broke off.
What a shame. We saw a bit of smoke coming from it a lap or 2 before, Robbie. Was there any problem with it?
No, it does that a little bit just as you back off. That's fairly normal. So we run them a little bit more oil in them for the endurance races, so that'd probably account for that. But everything's fine, just foot peak break, it's just bad luck.
Conditions very hot, Rob.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Very hard work.
Very hard work for Mal Campbell today, I'd imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I reckon he'll be really feeling it.
Rob, thank you.
That, of course, helps this man, Robbie Phillips, because it brings him 1 place forward. And he needs, it seems, all the help he can get. Look at Cox on 40, Campbell on 3, Phillips on 6, having a good scrap here. Campbell wanting to get busy on Cox. And they now are looking at 4th place, 5th and 6th. Sorry, 3rd for Cox, 4th Campbell, 5th Phyllis. Phyllis had a bike that seemed to drop off in acceleration at Sugo a weekend ago. And so often as they come now past Jeff Paul, so often when Robbie's had his chances overseas, sometimes the machine hasn't performed properly. He had that too in the Austrian Superbike round at Österreich where Malcolm Campbell went so well. I was going to say, Greg Hansford, why is it that Australian motorcycle racers do so well? Is it the emphasis on starting on short circuit, dirt circuit motocross, getting used to sliding a bike around before they go road racing?
It must be much to do with the sort of circuits that we do have here. And, when you get to Europe on the big wide open circuits, it's a new lease of life and something different. And whether the inspiration you get from looking at a circuit like say Österreich or Silverstone or something like that just brings out the best in you. It's the way that it seems to have happened with the guys that have gone over there and done good.
Do you think if you can scrap round in this sort of tight traffic in tight situations, then when things are more open, it all comes more naturally?
It is, for a fact, it is that way. The first time that we went over to Daytona, for instance, with a big wide open circuit there in the infield, it just came very easy. And Paul Ricard circuit in France, which is a mile and a quarter long straight with lots of 100-mile-an-hour corners, they're fantastic. But we had a few bits of basic training back here in Australia, like the corner at the end of the straight of Surfers Paradise, which is probably the fastest corner in Australia.
It's not daunting suddenly discovering those fast corners and running at very high speeds for a long time.
No, well, the first time you do it, you find yourself going around, one of those corners in whatever country you might be with one of the local hotshots, and you realise that you can do it, and just take it from there.
Rod Cox is now a second in front of Malcolm Campbell. He's pulling away, obviously. Phyllis is tagged to the back of that Honda. Phyllis is in 5th, Campbell's 4th, Cox 3rd. Dowson, Doohan, 2nd and 1st. And as ever, Malcolm Campbell looking very aggressive on the bike and making the bike work and jump about a fair bit. Quite a contrast to the smoothness of the man behind on the Kawasaki. If your riding style's different too, Greg, sometimes you tend to set the bike up differently, don't you? But,
very differently. The riding styles have got so much to do with even the wear and tear on the bike. Like, if you look at Mick Doohan's style, to me, he looks to be very, very easy on the machinery. The way that he's, you know, picking the bike up out of the corners and not accelerating until he's fairly well out of the corner, and with the bike upright, not wearing out the back tyre. They're all the little things you've got to think about when, you know, in a 1 hour race.
1.37 seconds now, the gap from Cox, 3rd place, to Malcolm Campbell, 4th. Michael Doohan streaming away, he's covered 23 laps, or he's covering his 23rd lap. And he's been racing for 23.5 minutes. In a 55-minute race. So 27's the halfway mark. This is the battle for 4th. And I'm sure everybody out there today listening, delighted to know that if you want to watch the Brazilian Motorcycle Grand Prix, not just the 250 class, but the 500 class as well, you'll watch it on SBS television. We'll be bringing it to you live on Sunday morning, late Saturday night, not Sunday night. 2 weeks' time, SBS television, the 250 class first, then the 500 class, a continuous coverage live of both on SBS 028. Malcolm Campbell, 4th on bike 3. The nuggety Tasmanian, wiry, lean, very fit when he's not bruised. Greg, from living in the Grand Prix atmosphere as you did for several years, you'd know better than most that to bring it here to Australia, how it will fire up Australian riders like Darryl Beattie and David Moore and all these other people, Jeffrey Sale, Michael Doohan, and so on. It's going to be an enormous fillip, isn't it, for local motorcycle racing?
I don't think anyone here in Australia just realises what it's actually going to do, you know, for the motorcycle industry mainly. But you know, just 55 different things it's going to benefit. And I was just thinking a couple of seconds ago how nice it would be if you know, these factories made a few extra bikes and brought them out here next year for half a dozen of our guys to throw in with these with the hot shots and really make a race of it.
Because the sort of 250s that we'll throw up against these guys and the 125s, new production factory races that they are, will be a fair way off the pace of the really gun bikes that the overseas top shots will have, aren't they?
Yes, they will be, and unfortunately Phillip Island will be the circuit where that will show up with the speed of the circuit. It's a very, very fast circuit down there, but also got to remember that the riders can do wonders on their home circuit, bring out the best in you.
Yeah. And here's Michael Doohan, and look at that, James Knight, 10th place, leader of the production class, 9th place now, of course, with the retirement of Rob Scollia, and lapped by Michael Doohan in less than half the race distance, 26 minutes. He's lapped 9th place. There are only 8 people out there that haven't been lapped by the flyer on number 25. This is the sort of devastating performance we saw him put in at Oran Park. Yes, the interesting thing is that Eddie Lawson hasn't raced, obviously, at Phillip Island. Wayne Gardner hasn't raced at Phillip Island, but Eddie Lawson's team manager has, and Wayne Gardner's team manager has, Jerry Burgess and Kel Carruthers. And Kel Carruthers, in fact, won the card there on one particular appearance. He won every one of the solo races. At least to have a bit of background as what it used to be like. It's going to be very different, I think, by the time Bob Barnard's finished with it.
It's a very, very pretty place. Well, it's going to look fantastic with 75, 80,000 people around there, and with a brand new circuit down there, I think you'll find that it'll be one of the best races that we'll probably have in the whole year next year.
Yes, it's going to be quick. It's going to run 300, 290 kilometres an hour top speed.
Yeah, the last half of the main straight down past the pits is a bit downhill, and I think Warren has estimated that the 500s will be doing very close to 300 kilometres an hour.
Michael Doohan is now 13 seconds in 26 laps ahead of Michael Dowson, his teammate. So he's made half a second a lap. Got his bike working a little bit there and looking a little bit loose. But when you can make half a second a lap constantly on the next of the best riders in the country, you've got to say the bloke up front doing it is travelling very fast.
Well, everything in the bike there's been running for half an hour odd now, be awful warm in the suspension departments, and when they set the bikes up here during the week, they would never ever run them for that amount of time. They would only just 10 or 15 minutes maximum, and the bikes never get to the operating temperatures that they would be at now.
At 13.7 now, Doohan back to Dawson. And back to Cox, who is in third place. It's 14 seconds. Malcolm Campbell, Phyllis then, still in fairly close company. Then it's 5, Alfini. 1, Tony Armstrong, and lapped, but a very good battle going on between Sean Gallagher on 35 and the leader of the production class, James Knight, on 16. See Phyllis Campbell still out of hammer and tongs, and Phyllis in front of Campbell, so he reversed that on this lap, completing the last lap in front of Mal Campbell. So suddenly we've seen the grit that we need and that he needs and that we expect from him to bring him up to 4th place, to start to make more sure of his position in the championship. Rod Cox goes by in 2nd, then 3rd place, and then the battle, Phyllis Campbell and Sean Gallagher, 35. He's in 9th place on a superbike. He's a bit knocked back. Sorry, he's 8th place, a bit knocked about. And James Knight there, running very wide through Hungry Corner up towards the top of the circuit, leads the production class on bike number 16. Just 22 years old, James Knight. Originally from Launceston, Tasmania, down in the pits. A very sunburned, I imagine, or hot, John Smales.
But with a very relieved Peter Doyle, the Team Kawasaki manager, standing beside me, Will. Peter, you were a little bit worried when Robbie was back behind Mal Campbell.
Yeah, we hope to finish around 3rd or 4th place. And Robert Scollier helped us by dropping out of the race, but 5th place is the minimum we can finish, so we'd sort of like to do better than that in the first race.
Why did you think Robbie hung back as much as he did?
Sorry?
Why did Robbie hang back as much as he did?
He said he wasn't going to go for it right from the start of the race. There was no need. He's got to finish, and Rob Phillips should be able to finish in the top 5. And Michael Doohan has to win, so we've got to make sure we're there for the second leg.
Thanks very much indeed.
So good battle here. 1000cc Proddy bike is number 16, 750cc Superbike. And Greg Hansford, I know you've ridden these 1000 Yamaha road bikes, FZR 1000, as they come out of the crate, and you're pretty mightily impressed by them.
Very fast. Well, the 750s and the 1000s now are running about the same speed straight out of a crate that our 750 Grand Prix bikes used to do 10 years ago.
Truly.
Around about the same horsepower, and they're capable of speeds in excess of 160 miles an hour. But they would never get around the circuit as fast as the old race bikes, just purely because of the tyres and the weight situation.
And what about handling? Because they do that pretty well too, don't they?
Oh, the bikes that they've got on the road available these days are just absolutely magnificent as far as handling and just all round. You can take them straight out of the crate, put them on a racetrack very safely.
After 30 minutes, just over half race distance in this 55-minute first heat of the 6th and final round of the Shell Oils Endurance Championship, it's Doohan streaking away from his teammate Michael Dawson. Rod Cox hanging on in a comeback ride on bike number 40 for Just Motorcycles, a Yamaha 750, very nicely. And his superbike ahead of Robbie Phillips. He battled back to 4th place, but he hasn't finished the argument, I think, with Malcolm Campbell. Campbell is trying very, very hard back there in 5th place on bike number 3 for Team Honda Australia. His teammate Rob Schollier's out on bike number 12. Then it's Paul Feeney for Arcade Chains. Tony Armstrong, the best placed Suzuki, bike number 1, the defending endurance champion. And Sean Gallagher just ahead in 9th place of the production class leader, James Knight, on number 16. That was the battle we saw just a little while ago. 21 there is John Stamnus. To come back to these production bikes, Are they really, in practical terms, too fast for the sort of people who've got access to them?
I think, yes, they're much too fast for a 17-year-old kid to be able to go out and buy one. You know, the 17-year-old rider now is restricted for 1 year to a 250, but the silly thing about it is the 250s can do 220 kilometres an hour. The way they should be doing is restricting the horsepower so they can go out and buy an XT600 or a nice dirt bike and learn safely on something like that.
Because if they learn on the right sort of bike, it's fine, isn't it? They learn the right sort of skills and so on. But these things have enormous acceleration response, don't they?
Well, you know, like I you know, haven't done much racing in the last 5 years, but I can get on an FZ 750 or 1000 and go and have a ride, and it quite easily catch you out with the amount of horsepower that they have got.
Making very good use of it. Michael Doohan, 23 years old, recruit full-time just the beginning of this year to the Marlborough Yamaha dealer team, a team that I welcomed to local motorcycle racing, and I think the events have borne out the worth of having them here. It's been unfortunate that other teams haven't been able to match their professionalism. They haven't done it by money, they've done it by intelligent preparation, picking the right sort of riders, minimising crashes, minimising breakdowns and high-performance tune, and just sort of being properly prepared. And they've had a lot of results. They've paved the way for Kevin McGee to be recognised and get into the World Championships, and now there's a chance of another young Australian to go the same way. And surely that's got to be good for motorcycle racing. That's Chris Hunt, Canberra's Racing Medico, on bike number 24 for TJ Tyres from Canberra. FZR 1000. And he loves his motorcycle racing, and motorcycling is a thing, Greg Hansford, that once you get it in your bones, just the fun, the tremendous freedom, it really is. Every time you get on a bike, it's like swallowing a bottle full of tonic, isn't it? You just feel fantastic.
Very exhilarating. Well, I mean, I've got a lot of friends that you know, don't ride motorcycles to work every day of the week, but they just love getting up on a nice, cool Sunday morning and going for a ride through the country somewhere, and it's you're just in a world of your own, and it's they will never ever give that up, no matter what age they get to.
Robbie Phillips back there is in 4th place overall. He's on 33 laps completed, while Doohan and on number 2, Michael Dowson, have completed 35. So then it's Rod Cox, Rob Phillips, Malcolm Campbell, all lapped back to there. So only 4 that Michael Doohan hasn't reined in this stomping ride. And then behind, or a lap down, comes number 5, Feeney, Sean Gallagher, James Knight on 35 and 16. And the thing is too that you don't have to go fast. While they can go fast, you don't get held up by traffic. It's just lovely swinging through some bends on a lovely day. Tremendous feeling of freedom, and Phyllis up in front of Rod Cox.
The great thing about the factory involvement in these bikes as well is that you see, the following year, all the good things that have come out on the racetrack are on the road going bikes, and not so much as horsepower goes, but safety and tyres and wheel sizes and brakes.
Well, Honda, one of the most advancing of the car manufacturers, says motorcycles are our advanced technology department. They weren't the exact words they used, but that's where they try out their new high-tech ideas. And Phyllis now looking back to Rod Cox and leading him even at this quick stage for 7/10 of a second, with another 8/10 of a second back to Malcolm Campbell. So we're looking there at Phyllis 3rd, Cox 4th, Campbell 5th. So we always knew or thought that Phyllis would be able to come back, assuming he didn't have a machine problem, but in his own relaxed way, he was cool about going that far back in the field. That's the gap. 3rd, 4th, 5th.
That's what experience does for you, Will.
Yes, being able to sit back and come back at them again. Saw Kevin McGee doing that down at Phillip Island, Winton at least, when he won one of his first major races, a 2-hour race down there, and he let them go, and he had a pit stop advantage, and then he hauled them back in when he needed to and just clap on the pace. Indeed, I've heard it said about you, Greg Hansford, that somebody tells you to dial up a faster lap time, you can very easily do it. And usually the good riders and drivers can do it on call.
I guess the real knack of being able to do something like that is knowing when you can't do it, not when you can do it, because if you don't get around the end of the lap, there's not much of a result there.
Where do you go looking for it? If a team manager sort of gives you the hurry up sign and hangs his hand out, what do you do? Just start braking a little bit later, or
first thing you do is give him a rude sign back and then realise that he's the boss and you've got to do it. But you just pick on the corners that if you do happen to make a mistake, well, you're not going to run into anything, obstacles on the side of the track. But it just...
you go a bit harder, deeper into the corners?
I was going to say, the major thing really is the brakes. You can't make a motorcycle go any faster because the throttle only goes to round to the stop. But if you can get out of the corner, coming onto any straight half a mile an hour faster than the guy beside you, well, you'll be travelling half a mile an hour faster than him all the way down the straight, and you have that, that advantage. And if you can put the brakes on 10 feet later than what he does, it's only a hundredth or a couple of hundredths of a second. But if you can do that at every corner around a circuit, well, you're talking in tenths of seconds.
In fact, you were talking about that a little while ago when at Brands Hatch you were coming up to lap a rider. You tucked in behind him down the straight. He came back past you, as we see here. James Knight on 16 is in 9th place at the moment. You were behind this rider. Who was it again?
I think the guy's name was Derek Chatterton, one of the top English riders. But we had Kenny Roberts and myself had come around to lap him, and on the Kawasaki I was on years ago, it wasn't as fast down the straights as the Yamaha was, and I passed him around the previous corner. He passed me down the straight again, and I pulled in and got a bit of a draft all the way down the straight behind him. But I guess I had my brain in neutral, and he was braking 50 metres earlier than what I was, and just went straight over the top of him at 160 mile an hour, which wasn't really much fun.
So that was about the area where we saw that dreadful Formula 3000 crash at Brands recently.
Yeah, exactly the same spot. Well, it's down that straight, and at the end there's a very, very fast, 120 mile an hour right-hand corner.
We've seen recently some very bad crashes in car racing, and we've seen motorcyclists, Wayne Gardner and others among them, step away from some fairly nasty looking crashes, both heavy thumps on the track. As we come back here onto the race leader, he's coming round to complete lap 39 now. He's been racing for 40.5 minutes in a 55-minute race. We've seen motorcyclists walk away from a lot of stuff. With the boundaries moved back now, we're not getting the sort of injuries we once saw for the two-wheel races.
Which is terrific. It is mainly track safety. You can fall off a motorcycle at 170 miles an hour and slide along the ground, and if you don't hit anything, well, you might have a couple of bruises or a bit of skin gone, but at least you can get up and ride again in the next race. But I think that where the problem stemmed from is that 30 to 40 years ago, the guys that were riding then were now doing a lot of the motorcycle officialdom around the world, and they virtually say if we can do it back then, well, you can do it now. But the motorbikes are going 60 miles an hour faster than top speed, and twice as fast around the corners. And
Kel Carruthers points out that the type of racing is different. These days you're scratching in lower gears around tight corners, whereas in the old days you were setting sail in top gear through some big flowing corner, as we see here, overtaking Wayne Clark, who in the production class is leading the championship and is 11th outright in the race.
These bikes now would have probably 3 to 4 times the horsepower of the bikes even just on 20 years ago, which is an enormous difference. And when the horsepower changes and the tyre technology and the frames change, the riding styles have got to change too. And if you can't change with the times, well, you're just going backwards.
Michael Doohan, a man well in tune with the times, a young man going places, undoubtedly headed for international motorcycle racing next year. Will it be a short select Grand Prix program of 2-3 races? Will somebody offer him a full season? Will he stay in Australia and concentrate on Australia-Japan as he's done this year? That depends on the offers. The offers are certainly, or the interest is certainly there. He's a good style of young kid, and some people are saying, we reckon Kevin McGee's a gun rider and Wayne Gardner's proved himself a gun rider, and some are saying this young man's got more talent than McGee. I don't know, he's got to get up there yet and prove it. That's a strong claim to be made for somebody who's never ridden a Grand Prix bike, but certainly he's got very little race experience, really. You were telling me, Greg Hansford, in your early days of racing, you were racing 8 bikes in a season, 50 weeks out of 52.
Yeah, well, motocross and short circuit as well as road racing will, but that seems to be out of the question at the moment. It's so specialised now, very hard to get off even a 750 or a 500 Grand Prix bike and back onto a 250. You can't compete. There's probably 2 or 3 people in the world right at this minute that could do that, and they're not racing motorcycles.
And does that mean that with everybody concentrating just on one class and one type of racing, that they're getting closer to 100% performance in that class?
Sure. Well, we've been saying that for the last 7 or 8 years, that the 100% is going to be reached very shortly, but every race that these guys, every racetrack that these guys go back to, they always seem to go faster.
Michael Dowson, teammate for this man, is, as he comes across the start-finishing line, 8 3/4 seconds behind his teammate Michael Doohan. They've both completed 42 laps, so 42 laps, 18 3/4 seconds. It's gone out to less than half a second a lap, the ground that Doohan's made up on Dowson. This is the man in 3rd place, Rob Phillis, Kawasaki. He's ahead of Rod Cox on 40 and on Malcolm Campbell on 3, on 5. Paul Feeney, 1, Tony Armstrong, ahead of Sean Gallagher, James Knight, and Russell Wood. Russell Wood on 18 is in 10th place overall at the moment. A pretty spectacular ride. There's Rod Cox, 4th place, and Malcolm Campbell's after him, and immediately in front of them is, in 17, Carlos Van Vliet. Is in a hurry to get round him, and he's gone the wrong side. He just makes it work, but he lost really a lot of speed and line up to the top of the hill there, and that's critical because the run down from there onto the straight is what you were talking about, Greg Hansford. The time, the good run that can give you a second and a half just on your entry speed to the straight.
It's hard to believe that going around the top of the loop up there is going to alter the speed coming past the control tower here, but it does very much so.
21, John Stamnus, being lapped again, Suzuki 750 production bike. So unlike the leaders in the production class, which are 1,000 Yamahas, that's a 750 Suzuki unmodified in the production class. 130 horsepower for the Yamaha 1000. An instant throttle response, a bit like a rocket. And the people riding like rockets, Michael Doohan, nearly 19 seconds now in front of his Marlboro Yamaha dealer teammate Michael Dowson. Rob Phillis, series leader, Kawasaki team rider, lone rider in the team. 3rd place, Rod Cox, battling furiously in 4th place with Malcolm Campbell, as he's been doing for most of this race, which is now in its 47th minute. So that's the situation just a minute ago. And Malcolm Campbell ahead of Paul Feeney, James Knight, Sean Gallagher. So Knight on 16, doing well in the production class. But so too is Rodney Cox, the man now living in Campbelltown, but originally outside Sydney, originally out Gunnedah way, 83. He won the Castrol 6-hour race, and he's won the Yarra 6-hour race at Bathurst. No East of Bathurst motorcycle races next year, unfortunately. Although I think it's the right decision. It's only 2 weeks before the Australian Grand Prix scheduled at Phillip Island, and to try and run a major meeting at Bathurst, that sort of time gap would be suicidal, I think. We'll have it later in the year, a couple of weeks after the car race, next October. So it's more than a year away. And this, the Cox-Campbell battle. Campbell going down the inside and saying thank you. 4th place. In behind, Doohan 25, Dowson 2, Phillis 6. It's now Campbell 3, Cox 40. 5, Feeney. 1, Armstrong. 35, Sean Gallagher. 16, James Knight, leader of the production class. Then 18, Russell Wood. 69 is John Richards. That's another of the production bikes. And 9 is Wayne Clark, who's leading the production class. So Clark on 84 points leads James Knight on 76, Andrew Roberts on 69, Chris Harmon, the Medico, 59. And Campbell now trying to pull away from Rod Cox, who a little bit bravely, a little bit gamely, slotted himself inside Brian Bernard, who decided he was going to peel off for the corner down the bottom.
What you call a perfect fit.
And then he very wisely decided he'd wait a moment, just a moment, let Rod Cox through, and he hasn't given away the battle to Malcolm Campbell. All crouched down, arms and elbows. And Cox, out wide, pull it back together. And nicely, Bernard says, I'll hang on a moment. You're in a different sort of race to where I am. And Cox goes out after Campbell again. It shows he was doing what it looked as though he was trying to do, which was to get back at Malcolm Campbell. But that's cost him second and a half, probably.
The bikes are beginning a bit mushy, will, the suspension and the tyres and that sort of thing. You've got to expect that they're not going to feel like they did in the first 10 laps of these races, so you've just got to take according action.
So now, lap 48 for the race leaders. The only people not lapped by Michael Doohan are Michael Dowson, Rob Phillips, Malcolm Campbell and Rod Cox. So if we stay with Cox a little bit, it's about 5 seconds back perhaps to Michael Doohan. Might be 7 seconds. Here's Campbell in fourth. Back part of Lakeside Circuit, sweeping downhill here. The bike's sitting down on the suspension. The riders have to sit it up a bit, can't get it quite square before they have to break it, bring it up through Hungary Corner, the corner that claimed Len Willing in the Swan Series here last December. And then swooped down off that and onto the main straight. And Phyllis battling Tony Armstrong and overtaking him. Campbell's 3.4 seconds only behind Phyllis, and Cox is 4.6 seconds behind Campbell, so he's lost a lot of ground in the last 2.5 laps or so. And my guess at the time gap back to the lapping, the flying Michael Doohan, a little bit out, it's 12.2 seconds before he comes up to lap Rod Cox in 5th place. 12.2 seconds in arrears, and 4 minutes now, exactly before the race finishes. So, Campbell consolidated and looking for Rob Phillips. A bit keen, and I'm wondering if he can do something about it. The race leader. Monowheeling his way down through a corner now that's slowed up the approach to the run under the bridge there, because that bridge, very close to the edge of the track, totally and utterly unforgiving, and it produced some nasty accidents. And on this tight track now, with 51 minutes 40 seconds covered, Doohan's on his 50th lap, so he's just outside the even lap time of a minute a lap. Across the start-finishing line, laps James Knight, and tucked in behind him on a corner that's very fast, and they were in very close company indeed, was Jeff Paul. So it was 2 laps down to Paul, 1 to James Knight, and the late race leader obviously completing and lap 50, starting on 51. And his lead now, it's only now that Michael Dowson comes across the line, 29.6 seconds in arrears to him. So it has gone back out to more than half a second a lap. Then Phyllis is 14 seconds further away. Campbell's 3.35 seconds, so he's lost nothing to Phyllis in the last few laps. Rod Cox then, though, has lost 5.9 seconds to Malcolm Campbell. And Cox, of course, in 5th place. And then Doohan flying around ahead, of course, of Sean Gallagher on 35, James Knight on 16, whom he's just lapped twice. So he has lapped 8th place twice, Michael Doohan. That's devastating, Greg Hansford.
Yeah, he's certainly not letting up. Willem, to be doing the lap times that you just mentioned then is, he must be very comfortable at it. He's going to get a bit of a play around there, but he's in the groove, and if he stays like that, he's probably got less chance of making any mistakes, other than slowing down and losing concentration.
You raced a lot against Warren Willing. You know the man well. You know how hard it is to get him to smile on occasion.
He smiled this morning.
Now, he'd be smiling, wouldn't he? He would be a happy man right now.
Yeah, well, you know, to have 2 bikes in 1st and 2nd place, you can't achieve a much better result than that. And,
sorry, Greg Hansen, should be 1 lap remaining after this. That's 54 minutes now. So it'll be almost precise to the 55 minutes when Michael Doohan comes round the next time. 52 completed. He's on his 53rd. And he has been quite devastating here at Lakeside Circuit, just out of Brisbane. Brisbane invaded by Expo. But this is something else going on, and there's a nice crowd enjoying it in absolutely beautiful weather. You do have to say, Queensland's not a bad sort of a place in this time of the year. It's comfortably warm, but not too hot. Although for Michael Doohan, I reckon he'd lost a bit of fluid, and we'll have to think about some solid fluid intake in the 20 minutes gap to the start of the next 55-minute race. The 12th and final heat of the Shell Oils Australian Endurance Championship. 1 corner remains for Michael Doohan now to get the checkered flag for victory in this first heat in the 6th and final round of the Shell Oils Australian Endurance Championship. It is success all the way for the 23-year-old in the Marlboro Yamaha dealer team 750 Superbike, gloriously ridden in a race he dominated. From his teammate, Michael Dowson should be next. But the man there has done it brilliantly. And now, while he cools down half a lap away, his teammate headed towards the finishing line, Michael Dowson, comes across the line in 2nd place, 31 seconds in arrears. And that's Dowson just finishing. Robbie Phillips claims 3rd place on bike number 6. He's 12 seconds further back behind Dowson to take 3rd place, and it's Malcolm Campbell 6.3 seconds back in 4th place. Then Rod Cox comes through on bike number 40 to take 5th. Paul Feeney should be 6th. He'll be delighted for the finish in what's been a wretched season for him between bike reliability and the odd error from the gutsy Goulburn rider that now lives up here on the Gold Coast. It was 1 lap down to Feeney and to Tony Armstrong on bike number 1, and then it was a further lap down to Sean Gallagher, 8th on number 35. The winner of the production class, James Knight, 16, his bike number in 9th place. Then on 18 it was Russell Wood. In 11th place overall was bike number 9, the production class leader, Wayne Clark. And there's the man that led him to it, that pulled him into the team, Warren Willing. Michael Doohan, and John Smales is down there with them.
And Mick Doohan a bit exhausted, just getting his helmet off. Mick, how was it out there?
It was pretty hectic with all the traffic there, but other than that, it was fine, yeah.
We're a bit concerned about the heat, Mick. How's it affected you?
The heat's no problem out on the track. I think it's just when you're standing around, it's fairly hot. It's okay out on the track, yeah.
Well, sensational racing from you. You were lapping at 62 seconds a lap at the start of the race, and I just put a lap on you. You were still doing 62s, nice and consistent.
Yeah, that was the plan, just to be consistent. But yeah, everything worked out fine. I'm happy.
The bad news is that Robbie Phillips finished 3rd.
I thought he'd finish 2nd, actually, but he finished 3rd. I got no doubt he'll finish in the same place or better in the next one.
So there's not much you can do in regard to the series, you think?
No, not really. Not unless something mechanical happens to Robbie, because he never crashes. So And the Kawasaki's pretty reliable, so I don't think that's going to happen anyway.
Mick Doohan, thanks very much indeed. We'll let you go get a drink. Well, that's the situation down in the pits as it is at the moment. We'll be back at Lakeside International Raceway at Brisbane very shortly with round 2 of the Shell Oils Australian Road Racing and Endurance Championship for motorcycle.